For centuries, we've believed that God only wages war against evil, that heaven's enemies are demons, devils, and the forces of darkness that fell with Lucifer. But what if the truth is far more unsettling? What if the greatest rebellion didn't come from hell, but from within heaven itself? Scripture whispers of a hidden war, a war not just against the wicked, but against angels, celestial beings who once stood in the presence of God, only to defy His will. They didn't fall by accident. They weren't tempted by Satan. They chose disobedience. They chose themselves. And some of them were named. Azazel, the watcher who gave mankind forbidden knowledge, weapons, enchantment, seduction. The Prince of Persia, a heavenly power who blocked God's own messenger for 21 days. These weren't monsters. They were once divine, but they crossed a line heaven could not ignore. God's response wasn't silence. It wasn't banishment. It was war. This is not allegory. This is not ancient myth. This is the buried truth the church no longer speaks of, because it doesn't just reveal the fall of angels. It reveals the standard of holiness, even in heaven. Not every angel who stands in light is loyal. Not every war is against hell. And not every enemy wears the face of evil. If this truth shook something in your spirit, it wasn't by accident. Subscribe to unveil what others fear, and tell us in the comments, do you think the war in heaven ever truly ended? The angels who crossed the line, before the flood, before the tower, before the law. There was a rebellion in heaven, not loud, not dramatic, but quiet and deliberate. And it didn't begin with Lucifer. Heaven had assigned watchers, celestial beings tasked with observing the human world. But something happened. Observation turned to desire. Duty gave way to temptation, and angels who once stood in purity stepped down into the dust of earth. Genesis 6:2 says, "The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves from any they chose." These were not human kings or noblemen. The Hebrew term used is Bene Elohim, sons of God, a title used consistently in the Old Testament to describe divine beings, angels who stood in the courts of heaven itself. They descended not by force, but by will, and what they did was not simply sin, it was spiritual treason. They took what was forbidden. They crossed a line written into the very fabric of creation, the boundary between the divine and the mortal. And from that union, something was born. Genesis 6:4 continues, "The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them." The Nephilim, giants, hybrids, creatures of immense strength and unnatural presence, neither fully angel nor fully human. But behind these beings was an agenda, led by one name that still echoes in the shadows, Azazel. According to the book of Enoch, Azazel was not merely one of the watchers, he was their teacher, their corrupter. He taught men how to forge swords and daggers, how to craft beauty from metal and darkness from vanity. He introduced enchantments, seduction, and the secrets of violence, not for survival, but for dominance. Azazel did not fall because he was tempted. He fell because he believed he could do better than what heaven allowed. These were not minor infractions. These were existential violations. The Nephilim were not merely large beings. They were distortions of divine order. They bore no soul breathed by God, no image of the Creator. They were born of lust, of power, of rebellion clothed in flesh. Across the ancient world, echoes of these beings appear. Giants in Canaan, titans in Greek myth, sky gods in Mesopotamia. But the Bible strips the legend down to its essence, a union that never should have happened, and a race that never should have existed. Their presence wasn't passive. They ruled. They dominated. They spread their bloodlines, corrupted civilizations, and taught men how to destroy each other in the name of advancement. And it worked. The Nephilim were not just strong. They were influential. They weren't chasing after God. They were replacing him. They inspired worship. They shaped cultures. They became gods in the eyes of men. And that is why heaven could not stay silent. Azazel may have been the first, but he wasn't alone. The Watchers moved as a unit, and what began as a breach became a takeover. Humanity was no longer truly human. The line between flesh and spirit was blurred, and what was once divine order descended into chaos. God didn't simply disapprove. He responded, not with a sermon, not with warnings, but with judgment. And that judgment would begin with a name, a command, and chains forged not by man, but by heaven itself. God's response wasn't exile, it was war. Heaven does not react in panic, it moves with precision. When the Watchers crossed the line, when Azazel led his brethren into corruption, God did not send thunder. He sent a verdict. The book of Jude records it plainly. And the angels who did not keep their proper domain, but abandoned their dwelling place, he has kept in eternal chains under darkness for the judgment of the great day. Jude 1 verse 6. This was not poetic, it was legal, judicial, absolute. These angels, once radiant, once called sons of God, had forsaken their assigned realms. They left the heavenly order, and the response was not forgiveness. It was containment. God commanded the Archangel Raphael to act, not to reason, not to persuade, to bind. 1 Enoch 10:4-6 describes it in chilling detail. Bind Azazel hand and foot and cast him into the darkness. Make an opening in the desert and cover him with rough and jagged stones, so that he may be buried in darkness until the day of judgment. This was not a metaphor, it was a divine prison. Azazel, once a leader among the Watchers, became the first example. His knowledge had infected humanity. His arrogance had redefined beauty into vanity, craftsmanship into idolatry, and wisdom into seduction. Heaven did not hesitate. He was cast down, entombed, and sealed beneath the earth. But he wasn't the only one. Dozens of Watchers were rounded up, those who had taken human wives, sired abominations, and taught mankind the ways of war and sorcery. The book of Enoch names them Samyaza, Arachiel, Ramil, each one sentenced, each one bound. These were not demons in the classical sense. They were still angels, divine in origin, but now chained in rebellion. Their punishment was not simply to be cast out of heaven. It was to be locked beneath the earth, alive, conscious, and awaiting judgment. This wasn't exile. This was war. Heaven drew a line. It said, "This far and no farther." And every angel who crossed it was met, not with grace, but with fire. What had begun as an unseen corruption now became a full-scale purge. The Nephilim walked the earth above, but beneath the surface, the Watchers who created them were being sealed away. God's justice was not delayed, it was surgical, strategic. It went to the source, and the message was clear, both to heaven and earth. No one is above judgment, not man, not beast, not even the angels of God. The civil war heaven never told you about. We've heard of the war between good and evil, between heaven and hell, but Scripture hints at another war, one far more dangerous. One that didn't happen between angels and demons, but between angels and angels. In Daniel 10:13, a divine messenger says, "The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me." This wasn't a poetic metaphor. It was a military standoff in the spiritual realm. The Prince of Persia was not a man. He wasn't a king or earthly ruler. He was a powerful celestial being, an angelic authority assigned over a region who resisted the will of God. And he succeeded. For 3 weeks, the messenger of God, possibly Gabriel himself, was blocked, delayed. Not by a demon, but by a rogue heavenly prince, a being who once served the throne, now standing in defiance of it. Even Michael the Archangel, the warrior of heaven, had to intervene. His arrival wasn't symbolic, it was reinforcement. This wasn't a conversation, it was a confrontation. This passage cracks open a deeper reality, that in the highest places, among heaven's own hierarchy, there are powers that no longer submit, beings who still hold authority but not alignment. Not every angel who remains in the heavens is obedient. Not every prince who rules in the unseen realm serves the light. Some resist, quietly, strategically, and God allows it, for now. The Prince of Persia isn't alone. Later, in Daniel 10:20, the messenger says, "Soon I will return to fight against the Prince of Persia, and when I go, the Prince of Greece will come." These are not coincidences. They are territories ruled by spiritual powers, and those powers are not neutral. There is a civil war in the unseen realm, a silent rebellion, one that isn't declared openly but unfolds in shadows, in delays, in interference with God's commands. These rogue angels do not wear horns, they wear crowns. They do not attack directly, they obstruct. This isn't the rebellion of Lucifer, it's something more subtle, more organized, a splintering within heaven's own ranks, a divine intelligence war, and Michael is still fighting it. We are taught that heaven is unified, that the hosts of God move in one accord. But the book of Daniel shows something else, something terrifying, that even heaven has dissenters, that even the messenger of God can be delayed by heavenly resistance. And if a messenger can be blocked for 21 days, what else has been delayed? What else has been stopped? The war didn't end, it shifted to earth. The heavenly rebellion didn't die in the skies, it moved, it adapted, and it found a new battlefield, earth. The Nephilim had been destroyed, the Watchers had been bound, but the powers behind them were not gone. They changed strategy, they traded brute force for influence, and they embedded themselves in systems. Ephesians 6:12 reveals this uncomfortable truth. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. This is not poetic exaggeration, it is a direct unveiling of spiritual hierarchy. We're not fighting human corruption, we're clashing with celestial resistance. Not demons crawling in shadows, but rulers in the unseen realm who sit on invisible thrones, shaping nations, culture, and even religion. These principalities aren't always violent, they're intelligent, strategic. They govern empires, whisper to kings, inspire ideologies. And worst of all, they know the language of heaven because they once spoke it. The book of Daniel already showed us that heavenly messengers could be blocked. But now Paul tells us that these same powers are not just up there, they're here, among us, operating through governments, belief systems, philosophies, and global agendas. They don't scream rebellion, they institutionalize it. They no longer need to descend and take wives. They influence minds, they write doctrines, they steer humanity not by possession, but by persuasion. And this is why the war is harder to see, because it no longer looks like giants. It looks like progress, enlightenment, freedom from God. These spirits don't attack the church with flames. They enter the pulpit, they dilute truth, they redefine holiness, they transform righteousness into mockery and call it love. They once tried to corrupt the bloodline of man. Now, they're after the soul of man, and their plan hasn't changed. Corrupt, divide, replace. But this time, not from outside, from within. And the most terrifying part? Most people have no idea it's happening. Because when spiritual war wears a mask of light, people stop fighting it. Revelation. The final strike is coming. The battle didn't fade, it escalated. And its climax is not behind us, it's still ahead. Revelation 12:7-9 declares it with piercing clarity. Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But they were not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. This is not symbolism. This is a prophecy. A final war in the same heaven that once cast down the Watchers. But this time it's not just Lucifer. It's his angels, his forces, beings who still carry the memory of light, but now burn with rebellion. This war is not for earth. It's for the skies, a celestial purge, a cleansing of realms where disobedience once lingered in silence. Michael returns, not as a messenger, but as a general. The same warrior who fought for Daniel now takes up his sword again. But this battle is not delayed. It is decisive. The dragon, Satan, is not cast down alone. He falls with his angels, the ones who stayed hidden, the ones who resisted quietly, the ones who wore their loyalty like armor, but secretly served another master. They are not called demons, they are called his angels, because not all rebellion wears horns. This is the end game of a war that began long before Eden. The final confrontation, not between heaven and hell, but between heaven and itself. It is not a battle of equal forces. It is a cleansing, a removal of every trace of disobedience from the highest realms. Because before God brings judgment to earth, he will first judge his own house. And when the skies are cleared, when the last of the traitors are cast out, then, and only then, will the full wrath of heaven fall upon the earth. This is the part they never told you, the part hidden beneath sermons and tradition, that heaven itself will be shaken, that angels will fall, not just those in hell, but those still masquerading as light. And when they fall, they will not return. Earth is the final battleground. Heaven is purging itself. The skies will be cleared, but the war is not over. It is coming here. Revelation 12:12 warns, "Woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He is filled with fury, because he knows that his time is short." The traitors will fall, but they will not fall in silence. They are coming to earth, not as giants, not as watchers, but as systems, as voices, as light. What began as rebellion in heaven will end as deception on earth. And their goal is simple, to build a world where God is no longer needed. These beings are ancient. They've worn many masks, divine rulers, pagan gods, enlightened philosophers, but beneath every disguise is the same agenda. Replace heaven's order, rewrite truth, hijack humanity's destiny, and this is the battleground now, your mind, your heart, your faith. They don't need to possess you, they only need you to forget. Forget who you are. Forget what's true. Forget that there's a war at all. They've been patient. They've infiltrated slowly. And now they rule from behind curtains. They write laws. They stir movements. They baptize rebellion as love. And they silence truth in the name of unity. This is not conspiracy. This is prophecy, a war foretold in Scripture, a final campaign that begins in hearts before it ends in fire. But you were not left defenseless. The same Michael who cast down the dragon still fights. The same God who bound Azazel still reigns. And the Lion of Judah, he has not forgotten earth. He's coming, not to persuade, not to plead, but to reign. And when he comes, the war ends. Until then, you are the front line. Not a spectator, a soldier, not a victim, a vessel. Stay awake, stay armored, stay holy, because the angels who once crossed the line are already here. If this truth stirred something in you, it wasn't by accident. For centuries, this war was silenced, erased, hidden beneath symbols, beneath dogma, beneath fear. But now, it's rising again. The veil is thinning. You weren't meant to be blind to this. You were meant to see, to stand, to remember what the world has forgotten, that not every war is visible, and not every angel wears white. Subscribe, if your soul is still awake enough to seek what others fear. Comment below what you believe still moves behind the veil. And above all, stay watchful, stay anchored, stay in the truth, because the war never ended. It only went silent, and now it's whispering again. This is Veil of Eternity.